Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to another inspiring episode of I Am Dad Podcast. Today we have the privilege of hosting two remarkable individuals who have made significant contributions to the realms of family mediation, parenting education, and responsible fatherhood. First, let me introduce Mark Perlman. With an impressive 35 years of experience working with children, families, and parents, Mark has dedicated his career to strengthening family bonds. He is the esteemed author of the Nurturing Fathers program, a transformative 13-week parenting curriculum for men who has been widely adopted by organizations such as Prevent Child Abuse, Head Start, the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative, and various state departments across the nation. In addition, Mark developed the Parenting and Marriage program, which aids couples in successful co-parenting. His extensive leadership roles include serving as the past executive director of the Family Counseling Center, the Child Protective Center, and Fathers United Network of Sarasota, Florida. Mark's expertise has also been recognized by his appointments to the Florida Commission on Responsible Fatherhood and the Governor's Child Abuse Prevention and Permanency Council. Above all, Mark is a proud father of two grown sons. Joining Mark is his son, Corey Perlman. Corey is a nationally recognized marketing expert, speaker, and consultant who recently celebrated his success of his third book, Authentically Social, which quickly became an Amazon bestseller in 2024. Despite his professional achievements, Corey's true passion lies in fatherhood. He has facilitated over 10 Nurturing Father programs, 6 of which were conducted within the walls of the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. Corey co-hosts the Nurturing Fathers podcast with his father and cherishes the moments spent with his beautiful wife and 2 amazing children. Together, Mark and Corey Perlman embodies the essence of dedication, compassion, and commitment to nurturing responsible fatherhood and strong family connections. Their combined experiences and insights promise to make this an enlightening and enriching conversation. Please join me in welcoming Mark and Corey to the stage. How you doing, gentlemen?
It's so good to see you and really glad to be here, my friend. And I have to mention the wonderful work Kenneth has done over the years. It's because of his kind of leadership that fatherhood has gotten to where it's at today in our culture.
Corey, Mark's was probably one of the first fatherhood programs that I learned about when I was the director of the New York State Fatherhood Initiative. And I remember calling him. This was, we now talking 20 years ago at least, if not more, right? And so, but he was doing training in Sarasota, Florida. And I had never been to Sarasota, Florida. I had never known how beautiful. Now I see why people moved to Sarasota. Yes. Back then, I haven't been there since. But came down to do the training on both of his. I probably still have those 2 curriculums somewhere in my office. I have to find them to get you to sign them because they are truly treasures. And so I've admired your dad. I've admired his work. I've admired the impact that he's had on this field and tried to mirror his success in the work that I've been doing. And so you stand in the shoes of greatness, and it's a blessing that you can't jump. so you can walk, and you can walk the journey of your dad. And so we lead off our podcast every episode with a very simple question, and I'm not going to frame this question for you. You just need to answer it the way you want to answer it. And Mark, I'm going to start with you. And the question is very simply, tell me your daddy's story.
Well, my daddy's story began in Copenhagen, Denmark, 50-something years ago. And I was living over there with my wife, the mother of Corey and Jamie. And we were over there just on an extended stay. I didn't know if I'd be staying for a week or a month or forever, but I needed to find out what the rest of the world was like. Well, we happened to get pregnant, given what the rest of the world was like while I was over there. And my first inclination was to come back home to the States where grandma is and friends are, and only to find out that they were not allowing fathers in the delivery room. And I said to myself, I'm going to do this once or twice in my life. My wife sure as heck needs me to be by her side for this. So I checked at Copenhagen, Denmark, and they said, stay over, pull up a bed next to her, sleep over if you want, be here and be a part of it. So we stayed in Copenhagen, Denmark for the birth of the first son. And after a couple of months, realized we do need to come back home where grandma and family are, and came back to the States, and the rest is history. But I went out of my way to make sure I was by my wife's side and I got to hold that baby for the first time. And that was a powerful experience, as most of you dads know, to look into the eyes of that firstborn and him to look back and say, whoa, this is my son.
Corey, what's your story?
My story is, when my wife was pregnant, I always say that, things didn't really change. I mean, she changed a little bit, but everything kind of, so, even though I knew my life was about to change, I didn't really feel it until that night when her water broke. And at that moment, everything changed. I just remember I distinctly remember that moment as the shift from being a person without children to the future. And we had a rough pregnancy. My wife wanted to do a natural birth at a birthing center, and it didn't go according to plan. And after about 40 hours of labor, I just remember feeling completely out of control. At one point, one of the doctors was reading the directions on something that she was about to, essentially insert into my wife. And I lost it. I'm just like, you don't know how to do this? And she's like, it's my first time. And I'm like, not with my wife. It's not. And so, it's that classic up and down, but it ended up in a C-section. And the silver lining to that was we didn't know if it was going to be a son or a daughter. And so I got to walk around and tell my wife what, child we had. And as I'm looking at our daughter, she had a lot of wires on her. So I didn't have the answer at first. And the nurse whispered, it's a girl. And so it's a girl, our lives have been changed ever since. And that was Talia 14 years ago.
Yeah. One of the things that I like about this podcast and what this podcast has allowed me to be able to do is tell both sides of the fatherhood coin, stories of both sides of the coin. And those sides represent for me the side that represents father's absence and the side that represents father's fullness. And I remember having a conversation with a colleague of mine some years ago, and we were doing a training somewhere. And me and a couple of colleagues had got up to the front and told our father absent stories. And, the room was emotional. And he came to me and said, man, I don't have a story like you guys have. He's like, I wish I had a story. I'm like, no, you don't. I was like, stop it. I was like, your story is just as relevant as my story. In fact, your story is even more relevant than my story, because what your story explains to me is why my pain hurts so much. You get to describe for me exactly what I'm missing, and you get to explain and show to me exactly why this hole feels the way it feels. And so I love telling the father fullness story because it gives some insight into why this work is so important. Talk to me a little bit about that piece, because it's also a beautiful thing to kind of see that you're stepping into this space, that your dad has created. But I want to understand a little more from you with respect to how your relationship with your dad has fed you over your years.
Yeah, that's great perspective. And I couldn't agree more with you on that. When we do the fathering story in the Nurturing Fathers program, there's always stories of absence and abuse and neglect. And it's traumatic. And for those of us that did have a present father, you know, we learn about that side, and vice versa, and just the connection, you know, and the importance of having a father. And then I also mentioned to the men too, that as they are trying to be that present father for future generations, I give them such respect because they didn't have the model. It was easy for me. I just had to look at my dad and do what he did. For these guys, they want to look at their dad and do the opposite. So I give them so much more respect than I give myself in that way, just because they didn't have the role model. My relationship with my dad, who's obviously sitting here right now. So, but you know, it's been great. That being said, you know, we had our bumps, as every, you know, father-son relationship. My father and mom divorced when I was 7. So I saw my dad on weekends and on Wednesday nights. And, you know, although there were challenges, the 2 things I'll mention to you, Kenneth, that stood out to me is, one is, as much as I think my dad probably had things to say, I never heard a negative word about my mom from my dad. And I just remember that. And now that I'm a father and I know how emotional we can get and about our kids, I'm sure there were times that he wanted to defend himself and say some things, but he never did. So that was one thing. And just recently, I had a friend of mine who grew up with us, and he just got divorced and is co-parenting. And he said to me, you know what, Corey, I'm modeling my co-parenting life after your dad and mom. He said when your dad would come into your house, he'd always kiss your mom on the lips or on the cheek just to say hello or give her a hug. And I just knew that they still had a strong bond, even though they were separated or divorced. And that's what I want with my my wife, or, you know, spouse, or former spouse. So so those are 2, you know, things that are distinct memories for me with my dad. And, you know, we obviously now the reward of that relationship is that we're best friends now, which is super cool.
Mark, what you got to say about that?
Well, I'm honored to hear Corey speak about it, obviously, as the father he's talking about. And, you know, I was blessed with a good father, I would say, as close to a nurturing father as that generation produced. He was a kind man, a hard worker, and he was outgone most of the time because he wanted to earn a living and bring our standard of living higher than what his was when he was growing up. But I also realized that he had a limited awareness of what fatherhood should be. And it spoke to that generation 40 or 50 now more years ago. And he felt that it was really a secondary involvement to him. He was not a primary parent like my mother was, or even a grandmother was. It was more be the breadwinner and be ready to be called for the heavy-handed discipline when necessary. And he filled those both roles, but he was a kind and gentle man, which I think in some ways inspired the nurturing part of myself. What I realized as I became a father is that I aspired to be more than just what I just described as a definition. I wanted to be a full presence, as almost as a mother was, in the sense of holding the baby, waking up in the middle of the night, changing diapers, fixing a bottle, knowing how to do those things. I wanted to make it a priority in my life. And it was a much larger undertaking than just heavy-handed discipline and breadwinning. Those 2 were, you know, breadwinning was important, but I wanted to fill much larger shoes. What I was blessed with, Kenneth, is a group of friends in Sarasota, Florida here, again, that many years ago, who also had new children and were new fathers, and they aspired to much the same thing. And I have to say that that support and friendship and walking the path together with 3 or 4 other men who I still know and keep in touch with and love dearly now was a huge benefit, because it would have been a lonely journey to feel I was doing it by myself, because I was creating a new image of fathering for me. But what we didn't realize is we were creating it for what the generations of fatherhood might like in the future, being more fully involved in that way.
You know, Mark, a lot of people think that this work has an academic path. right? And I often have people say, "So what did you go to school for?" Like I'm like, life. Like life be lifing. That's how I got here. That's my, that was my training ground. And so the journey into this work is always inspiring for me. Talk to me a little bit about how did you get to love this work? Because the reason that I use love this work is because I often tell people that this work of responsible fatherhood is not hard work, it's hard work.
Mm.
And if your heart ain't in it, step away from the mic because you'll hurt somebody trying to accomplish something that you truly don't understand from the heart. But talk
Yeah.
about your journey into this work.
Well said. Well, one thing I can guarantee you is I took no fatherhood classes. And that's the whole point. There wasn't anything like that. And it was like, it's the most important job we do. We know how complicated and detailed it is, and yet there is no real information and support. Um, but I started with my work involved the well-being of children. Where my heart was, Kenneth, was wanting each child of every nationality, every color, every race, creed, every child to have the same start, to get all they needed, to get their needs met, and to be able to grow to be what they were gifted to be. And I realized that there was just so little information that fathers were getting, as well as not feeling that they had a major role to play. They just didn't know, if we fix a toilet or if we change a tire on a car or anything, we got some instructions. We've got something that's going to guide us in how to do this job, whether it's a minor or major job. Well, no job is more major than being a parent and influencing the growth of this child to be what they can become. So my love for children led me to work with parents, and the parents that came to work with us were mostly moms. And I realized that the code word for parent in that generation pretty much meant moms, and dad didn't feel included and didn't feel invited. And I loved working with the moms. They serve an incredibly valuable part of the parenting relationship. But I said, dads don't have anything to really begin to educate them and guide them. So I sat down and I said, what would be the essential attitudes and skills? What the dads have to think about and begin to have the skills to perform that would create a good model for them. And so I sat down, I had a executive director job, Child Family Counseling Center, but negotiated a 4-day week and somehow sat down every Friday for a year and wrote down what elements I think fathers might need to be the very best dads they could be. And that was the function of research, talking to a lot of fathers, just really doing whatever I can to get as much information as I could. And from that huge amount of work and thought and taking notes, I created a 13-week experience for dads that I thought were the essential attitudes and skills of being the best father they can be. And we use that framework as nurturing father. What's also interesting is nurturing was solidly on the side of the moms in terms of definitions. It was not one that people would apply to fathers. So I realized in myself that I had definite nurturing inclinations, and I'm sure most men do if they're encouraged and informed to manifest those. So I took the risk of creating a program called the Nurturing Fathers Program, with the understanding I'd be bringing nurturing over to the side of men and masculinity, because I really felt it belonged there. Yeah.
Corey, what is it about this work that pulls your heart? Because you're a marketer, you have a whole nother thing going on, but somehow you're over here. And I believe that when you are in your profession, your passion will pull you from your profession if your profession is not your purpose or your passion or your purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what is it about this work that pulls your heartstring?
Yeah, you definitely said a couple of things on this podcast that ring so true, and I haven't ever heard it like that before. But that you definitely just explained how we are right now, where my bread and butter is my business, which is a marketing business, and it pays the bills and everything. But my heartstrings are pulled, as are my wife's, towards this work. Obviously, before I was a parent, I really didn't know what my dad did, to be honest. I would just kind of joke with him sometimes when I felt like he wasn't being a nurturing father. I'd be like, "Hey, man, you wrote the book on this, and yet I'm not feeling the nurturing right now." But
Been there, done that. Been there, done that.
but I really didn't fully, obviously, get an understanding of what he was trying to accomplish until I became a dad. So once I had, and I started wanting to learn more about being a dad, because like as my dad said, there was no framework. I got to know his program better, and then as in this business, the universe just has its way of pulling you in the right direction. And I had a friend who did a mentoring program in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. And when he learned about this program, he said, would you be interested in doing it with my group? And I said, sure, it'd be amazing. And, I later learned it takes 6 to 8 months, 2 years, 3 years to get something incorporated into the institution. It took us 2 weeks. Thanks to my buddy, his name is Des Thornton. His relationship with that facility, they trusted him so much. We got the program in 2 weeks. And the rest is history. I mean, I facilitated the program there for 7 straight years until COVID. And I've since facilitated it in different areas. And it's become a huge passion of mine. And the beauty is I get to work with my dad. We do a podcast, we do the work together, and it's just another avenue for our relationship to have grown even deeper. So beyond the fact that I love this work, and I believe there's my dad. And I believe in the work. Wow. You don't have to answer it, Dad.
Not going to answer it. I should put.
It's okay.
Good. Sorry about that, man.
It's okay. But I believe in the work, but it's given us an opportunity to not only spend time together, but also bust each other's chops when the phone rings and stuff like that. So
he picks up after me, man, when I can't handle it. Right?
Well, the funny thing is, like, one of the things that I always and often think about in my own fathering, right, is that sometimes when I am fathering, I have on my white lab coat and my clipboard, and I'm analyzing, my own fatherhood for the sake of what am I pulling forward. Do you find yourself doing that in your work? Like when you are fathering, you're trying to like, okay, well, did I do this like the right way? A, B, C, and D? Am I off kill? The hell with the rules right now. I'm going to do it this way because the moment calls for that. Like, how does your own fatherhood play into your day-to-day life?
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. I mentioned to the men inside our Circle in Nurturing Fathers program, I am a participant, not the teacher. And what I mean by that is I'm making mistakes every day. I am not a perfect father by any stretch. So I make it very clear that I'm learning as we go, and I make lots of mistakes. And my kids would be happy to come in here and validate that. So I try. Every time I'm facilitating the program, I find that I parent better because I'm more aware of it and it's front of mind, top of mind. And I can catch myself, Kenneth, like when I'm stressed, when I'm short tempered, when I find myself taking the easy route, I say to myself, that's probably not the best consequence or best result of what I was looking to accomplish. Maybe I could think through that and do it better. But yes, I think about it a lot, and I remind myself to give myself grace, as I want all the other dads to do, because it's not an easy job, and we're going to fail every day. But as long as we keep coming back, then that's all that matters.
I'll give you another quick example.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another quick example, just how sometimes you learn from your children. Corey here in particular, he was probably no more than a middle schooler, 12, 13 years old. And I was intent as a father in giving him as much information and guidance as I could, believing that I needed to kind of fill him up with good stuff as early as I could. And we're having one of our kind of heated discussions, and I am doing a whole lot more of the talking than he is. And he turned around to me, he looked me straight in the eyes, and he said, "You know, I can't get through the wall of words." And it's like, whoa, you can't get through the wall of words. And that means I am talking so much in my effort to get all this information across, lecturing him, and he has no feedback, and it's just not working. And that moment changed me. I said, I got to talk less and listen more. And it was one of those moments that I'll never forget, because he taught me a lesson. Really.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, 35 years in the game, are you still learning? Like, are you still
Absolutely.
learning? What are you
Oh,
learning?
absolutely. Especially during my parenting years, but now with my grandparenting years. Um, it's such a complex job. There are so many nuances. I mean, we have the digital age now, which we didn't have before. Huge things like that. It's like almost when the car was invented. Well, the digital world is as earth-shattering as that probably was. So it's that kind of stuff, but just it's never done. The work is so, the fathering is so complicated. The kids grow as ages and stages. Things happen with health and sickness, and so there's always more to learn. I always welcomed the learning. I was always very open to it. And as Corey said, every time I taught the Nurturing Fathers program, I walked away not only uplifted, but being educated some by the men in the room and what was discussed.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because, I'm sorry, go ahead, Corey.
Oh, Kenneth, I wanted just to say real quick. Dad mentioned a point about learning in the class, and I just wanted to share. It's a 1-minute thing, but there was a guy in the class, and I came with a complaint about my child, my daughter. I said every time we have a play date, she won't share her toys, and it's embarrassing. She just will not share her toys with the other girl. The dad is uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, what is her problem? And this guy Silk, his name was Silk, and he's in the prison, and he leans in. Anytime Silk leaned in, you had to listen. And Silk said, Corey, let me ask you a question. If I came over with little Silk to your house, it's okay. He said, and I was having a conversation with you. And I said, yeah. And he goes, and I asked you if I could borrow your car, would you be okay with that? And I said, I don't know, Silk, probably not. And he said, well, what about your house? And I said, no, that's completely out of. And he said, well, what if I asked to borrow your wife? And I said, now we got a problem, buddy. And he said, that's how Talia feels when her toys are being taken and played with. Those are her prized possessions. That's how she feels. So maybe you can take some of her precious toys out of the equation and use some of the other toys that she doesn't care as much about and put those in there. I was floored. I was like,
I'm floored.
wow. So I just wanted to share that story, and that, gosh, I have grown better as a parent because of the men in the class. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, that was incredible. I think at the wife part, I would have been like, Silk, where we going with this?
Put the gloves on, man.
He tells a good story, man. I'm like, whoa.
It sound like this conversation getting ready to go left right now. Let's get back on track. The interesting thing is like this generational aspect of this work now too, right? Because our children are now these alpha generation Zers, right? They're very different from your dad and I and your generation. So as you're working with these fathers, are you seeing that there are nuances with respect to what would be considered, oh, that's old school, we don't do it that way anymore, we got to change up? I'm sure you've seen the changes in the curriculum, right? From what you wrote, Mark, 35 years ago to what you're trying to teach today. Some of the stuff that was in that curriculum then don't fly today. What are some of those nuances that you're seeing when you're working specifically with these new dads?
Well, one of the things that I'm seeing, Kenneth, and this is a true blessing, and I don't take credit for this, the work that we've done. I'm sure it's influenced it some, but the generation that Corey represents is more father active and more nurturing and more involved than anything that I saw in my lifetime. that not every father, not every situation, certainly we know that, but generally speaking, his circle of friends and the people we know have been present for the births of their children, have been more hands-on in what they do, and just embrace the role in a way that is really positive. I think great for the kids, great for the spouse, great for the culture. And it's just something that this generation has learned, and I see it as a wonderful thing. So my work and your work, Kenneth, is on a track that promotes this and supports this. But this generation has taken a major step. I don't hear it much in newspapers or on TV or being celebrated in those kind of ways, but it's a major change in the culture that fathers tend to be just more involved, and they seem to be doing it on their own and loving it, embracing it.
What are you saying, Corey?
Yeah, I'd say there's a good and there's a kind of a good side and a bad side. I would say the good side is what Dad said, that the baseline of nurturing has definitely gone up and it's more comfortable and a part of our society now. And men, show their feelings more today than ever before. And you see that on TV and with athletes and stuff. So I think that's all good. The challenge I think that we have today is technology. And I mean, as Dad said, it's literally changed the game. And we have to start almost over in terms of learning how to parent in this world, because it's different than I grew up. And it's obviously different than how you guys grew up. And, the mental health issues and, just all these societal things that we just simply didn't have to deal with back in the day. We have to deal with now, and we don't have a script for it. So I'm finding myself having to really learn and figure out how to parent in the world of social media and technology. One example that I just saw recently was when we all grew up, there were very specific age limits for everything. You couldn't drive till 16. You couldn't drink alcohol till 21. You couldn't, they couldn't vote, whatever. When these kids go on the internet, there is no age. No one knows their age. They're 10 years old. They can do anything a 40-year-old person can do on the internet. There's no validation. So that's scary. Those are new rules that we never had to figure out before. So, that's the challenge that's in front of us.
And just let me say one more thing, Kenneth. When I created Nurturing Fathers, I created it in the hope, and I stress the hope, that it would be generic enough and applicable enough to every race, every type of fathering, a single father, a married father, a father who can only see his child on weekends. I wanted it to be applicable to as many, if not all of those fathers. And I didn't create it to deal with specific situations like, what do you do if a child throws a toy? What do you do if they spill their milk on the floor? Well, what do they do? What do you do if they're watching too much TV or spending too much time now online? There are infinite number of those problems that I can't solve in a curriculum. But what I try to do is create the attitudes and skills of how a father would approach every one of those discussions with kindness, with patience, what listening means and what active listening means, with discipline, but without having to be physically violent or yell. So it was more the type of fathering approach to the situations than trying to solve every type of situation. And the types of situations have changed dramatically. This underlying approach that I just described hasn't changed that much. Listening is still listening. Patience is still patience. Discipline is still discipline. So in some ways, the curriculum has not been modified to reflect all the new situations.
But I think one of the geniuses in what you did is something that I think I have gleaned from you in what I've created, is that for 35 years ago, you took on a word that wasn't associated with manhood and masculinity, and that is nurturing, right? 35 years ago, a man would probably punch you in the face if you said he was a nurturer, right? Because he would have a definition in his head about what nurturing was, and it would be close to him as being called a girl or sissy or anything in that space. And I tried to do the same thing when we created our academy by calling it Gentle Warriors, right? Because what we want to do is we don't want to take away the fact that they're warriors, but we do want to lean into the fact that there are elements of being a warrior that demands gentleness. It demands compassion. It demands nurturing, right? And nurturing looks different from a man and a woman. There are ways that I nurture my children as a dad that doesn't look the same way as the way she nurtures my children as a woman. And my perfect example was always like this. My son plays AAU basketball. I remember when he was younger, he hit his knee or something. And he came over to the bench and he's got tears running down his eyes. And I kind of look at him and I said, "What's wrong?" He's like, "I hit my knee." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Are you hurt or are you injured?" And he said, "It hurts." I said, "Because there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. Hurt, you can play through. Get that lesson today because you're going to be playing through hurt an awful long time of your life. Injury means that there's something wrong that has to be fixed, and we don't want to make it worse. We're going to stop and fix it." And that was like a 2-minute conversation we had, and he got it. He looked at me and he wiped his tears, and then he went next to me, which was where his mom was sitting. His mom reaches down, rubs his knee, puts her hand on his face, wipes his head, and he goes off onto the floor, and he is great as he always is. And when I saw that moment, I was like, both of those moments were nurturing for him. Like, we touch both sides of his spirit, the gentle side of what he needs and the warrior side of what he needs. When both of you think about this word nurturing, do you see that play itself out with the men that you're talking to, which is you got to
Yes,
still attach to their manhood, their masculinity, but you also got to get them to understand what nurturing looks like from them?
that's exactly right. It's the male way of nurturing, which is still being defined for us, but it is allowing nurturing to be moved over to our category, where literally, if you put a list of male characteristics and female, nurturing would appear on the female, it would never appear on the male 30 or 40 years ago. So, but I never thought that we had to do it like women or look more like women, although there may be some areas of overlap, that we will have our own way of doing it. Your description just now was perfect. I don't want to take masculinity away from men, and I would be very foolish to do that. What I wanted to do was add nurturing to expand our definition of manhood and fatherhood. And that is still being defined, but it is exactly as you just gave Kenneth, that great example. And we do it in our own way. Um, there is something, there's so many pictures now in terms of commercials and just in general of men holding an infant, or of men, they holding the hand of their daughter as they walk. And it's become very popular in the culture. What they sell things or do whatever by showing that. But it's great because you didn't see much of it before. Men were just a different kind of breed. And that is just really examples of what we hope the nurturing would be, that would expand our toolbox, not take anything away. One of the factors in all of this, which we may or may not want to go down this road now, is the whole idea of corporal punishment, and that nurturing fathers is a non-hitting program, meaning that we can help our children learn and grow, which is our role and is always our intention. But to pose the question, and I don't lecture about it, and I don't insult or shame about it ever, but it is that can we and do we want to be a father and nurture without fear of violence? Or do we feel fear of violence has to be in the mix? And that is a values clarification thing beyond just nurturing that I think I ask fathers to at least confront and deal with and come up with some. I think at a minimum, they probably hit less and think a little bit more before. But in many cases, they say, I have enough tools in my toolbox. Let me try A, B, C, and D before I ever get to that. And maybe I don't need to get to that. Maybe there are other ways I can assert myself as a father and a man that will influence them, but maybe hitting won't have to be a part of it. So that's a cultural challenge, because the corporal punishment is still a pretty much valued thing in our culture in some ways, but I can see it evolving and changing, and at least it's questioned now.
Yeah, I think there's a saying growing up, use your words, right? And you also heard a man of few words, right? And Corey, you used the conversation. You said wall of words. I think one of the things that we as men prided ourselves on generationally is wall of action, right? Wall of action was do as I say, not as I do. And if you don't do as I say, there's an actionable consequence for that. And as a man, that is my strength and my power over you, right? And so, and we parented out of a space of fear, right? It is to what you're talking about, Mark, is where someone subscribes to that world of action, wall of action, and they use discipline as one of the things they build their walls with. That if
Mhm.
you're not giving space to listen and for negotiation and
Yeah,
explanation of the discipline in and
yeah.
of itself, you're not being a parent, you're being an abuser and a
Well, let me give you a
controller.
quick example of how that I confronted that before any curriculum was written. Then I'll have Corey speak to this. His brother, before Corey was born, probably 2 or 3 years old, is sitting at the Thanksgiving table with my wife here, me here, and him in between us, sitting in the high chair. And my wife and I, coming from New York, are having a kind of loud conversation. It wasn't an argument, but we were speaking the way we speak. And I reached over to get the butter, and this little guy pulled back when I reached across him. And it just literally hit me in the chest as if I was punched in the chest, that he has learned to be afraid of me when I make a move past him, because I was spanking at that point. And I said to myself, is that the relationship I want to have with my son? Um, and it struck me very deeply. And I said, I've got to investigate alternatives to this, because I don't want him pulling back in fear when I put my hand across or come close. And it was a shock, but it was a blessing, at the same time. So that's a specific example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corey?
Yeah, the best thing I could say is just a quick anecdote from my one of my classes. I had a military man who was a father, and he talked about pow pows. He said that in his family, generation to generation, there were pow pows, and that's their term for hitting. And he said, my dad did it, his dad did it, his dad did it, and so on and so forth. And Corey, that's just a fabric of our of how we parent. It's pow pows. And so, again, we just kind of went through the curriculum, and in that curriculum, that question comes up is, do we want our children to fear us? And can we parent without fear of violence? I just asked that question. He comes back next week and he's got this big smile on his face. And I was like, what's going on? And he goes, no more pow pows. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, my wife and I spoke and we just came to the decision together that we want to do this without pow pows. And so from this point forward, we're going to figure out ways to discipline our kids without that. And for me, I told him, and it struck me that the generations moving forward will not know pow pows, because he changed that. He made that decision. How cool is that for him? And he was an inmate, and I gave him such a level of high respect because he made that fork in the road that nobody before him could do. So that was pretty neat. And yeah, I think that's what I believe and can be done. And discipline is the form of teaching. We need to teach, and the question is hitting teaching the lesson we want to teach them.
Absolutely. Let's take a shift because there's another element before our time runs out that I want to touch on, because you guys kind of both talked about, your relationships with the mothers of your children, your wives, your partners, and your marriages. But we haven't or don't talk a lot about. But you foresaw this 30 some odd years ago, Mark, when you also created the companion curriculum, which was the marriage curriculum, right? Because it was also important as you're talking to men about the responsibility of fatherhood, that they at the same time understand the correlation and the bridge to the importance of healthy relationships and parenting relationships and co-parenting relationships. How do you bridge those two things when you're out there talking to the fathers?
Well, part of nurturing fathers is skills for relating to the co-parent or the mother as well. Active listening, problem solving, conflict resolution are all part of the nurturing fathers thing. So I'm hoping that he brings those skills to the marital or the spousal relationship as well as the ones with the children. Now, marriage and parenting grew from the number of fathers who graduated nurturing fathers saying, Mark, this was really great and I've learned a lot and it's helping me and I bring this home to my wife, but boy, would it be something if we could sit together in a room and learn this together and compare her side and my side. So I said, maybe I could take the core of nurturing fathers material and get the masculinity part out of it and just say, well, what are these skills and attitudes, and have a him-her dialogue. And that's where marriage and parenting came from. It gives them that opportunity, if they want to take it, to invite their other half and participate in the learning and growing thing together. But the nurturing fathers almost needs to precede that, because they have gotten so little in our culture of the education, skill building. What if you tried this? What if you tried that? That I feel that, they used to sit in rooms of parenting programs and occasionally a father, male or two would come, but they were too shy to talk. They didn't feel confident, about being there with the women, but also they didn't have that much to add. But if they've taken nurturing fathers and then come to marriage and parenting, they got all cylinders firing at that point, and they could really have a balanced dialogue about how they want to parent together. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but at least the understanding of each other and open a dialogue. So.
I would say, there's a session in the Nurturing Fathers program that's very interesting, and it's about co-parenting. And I think the part of it that is so interesting is just because there's so many different relationships that are different. A lot of the men are not with their baby's mother, and it can be a toxic relationship. There are other men involved, so on and so forth. And so we just talk about who the end goal is, and it's the children. And so whatever relationship we've got going, how can we make it best for our kids? And a lot of it is swallowing our pride and figuring out a way to work with whatever situation we got. And so we have a very lively discussion. It's around week 9 or 10 about how we can communicate with our baby's mother and whomever else is in the relationship as best we can for the children. And I let them talk about it, because there's a lot of anger that comes out and frustration and all that. But we keep coming back to what can we do better? What can we do better? And it's a very, very good discussion. But I think it's so important for both sides to come to the table and know that at the end of the day, we're working towards giving the best lives we can to our kids.
Yeah, and let me mention just one quick thing, if I can. What Corey said at the very beginning of our talk today is that when I did divorce his mom, and there was anger at the beginning, and there was loss, and there was sadness, and the reason that I never expressed any of that to the kids, especially the anger, is because I didn't want my children hearing me say bad things about their mom. I didn't want my children hearing my anger. They did not need that. They were going through their own changes about this separation. And the worst thing I could have done is to say bad things about their mom and show this anger. So it was clearly for the best interest of the children for me to shut that down and do what they needed at that time. And thinking for a minute that they would be hearing that stuff at that point in their lives thank God I woke up to that and said that's not what I want to be doing here.
Yeah, I think that's the misconception about the work that we do, that everybody thinks that we're doing, not everybody, but most people think that the reason that we're working with fathers is because we have this love to nurture and work with fathers and we don't care about anybody else. When the end goal of this work is about child well-being and healthy families, including mom. That's why we do that. But we just believe that if we can nurture fathers in a way that makes them more equipped to be able to handle the problems and difficulties of parenting and relationships, that their children are going to fare better as a result of it. But the way that you get to children's healthier well-being is not by ignoring men and ignoring fathers and acting like they don't exist and they're not essential to the lives of their children. Over the years, Mark, and then in your space, Corey, what is it that still frustrates you when you're doing this work? Like, Mark, for you, like, I've been doing this 35 years and we still got to do X. We still got to explain X. Like, what are some of the things that still frustrate you, that you continue to work at?
I'd say the greatest thing right off the top of my head is recruitment and getting people there. I mean, the program is in all 50 states. They succeed in doing that. When I started that, one or two guys would show up. Then we got to maybe three or four. And before we got to 6 or 8, it was probably a year. But so they're coming now. We've made progress in that, but there's still the stigma of I don't need that. Maybe some other guy does who is struggling, but I'm doing fine. So it's a sense of pride, masculine pride, to help the guy get over that line. And what we need is a male voice like yours, Kenneth, saying over the phone, "Hey man, I've been through this. I know what you're talking about. This is something that you will enjoy. It's camaraderie with other guys. It's respectful." And sure enough, if the guy comes for one night, the first night, certainly by night 2, he's hooked. He comes for the full 13 weeks unless something gets in the way. But the recruitment is still hard because the male ego doesn't like to admit that we need to learn something or we might not know it all. But we've made great strides and we're going to certainly make more. The other thing that stands out, I would say, to me is the corporal punishment thing. And I don't want to belabor that, but it's like, I have strong feelings about it. It's just when you begin to take a step back and think about it, I don't really hit my dog to teach them. I can get frustrated and pull on the chain a little, so why would I, hit my kids? But I don't lecture, I don't moralize, I basically be cool. And
Mm-hmm.
but it's a hard one because the culture is still somewhat infatuated with the corporal punishment, and I know it's going to take time for that to. I'm absolutely sure it will move on, but it may take longer than I would have hoped.
Mm.
I would say, Kenneth, it's pretty easy for me. So I remember it vividly. Going into the prison and seeing a guy there, a young man, who's got a 10-year sentence or something to that effect, and he's doing everything he can to have a relationship with his kid. Yeah, he made mistakes, and he owns that, but he's sitting here wanting so badly to be able to see his children, to be a part of their lives, to communicate with them and to love on them. Then I leave and I go to a father-daughter dance, and I've got friends that are looking at their watches, waiting for it to be over. Even saying, God, this is taking forever, or and just taking it for granted. And it pisses me off, honestly. It's not, the guy in prison that I'm worried about. It's the guy next door. It's the weirdest thing, but like, there's still a lot of guys out there that just don't get it. And that's what frustrates me.
Yeah, I think that I love the fact that you come from a marketing back, or you have a marketing background, because so do I. Marketing plays a huge role in our work, because I believe that this work too has to be marketed. The culture of fathers has to be marketed in a way that we look at our dads as clients that we're trying to get and sell a product. Unfortunately, it's a product that people think you should already want, right? But marketing knows that. Don't assume that they want it. Make them feel like they have to have it, or that everybody else has it and they don't have it, right? And
Right.
so then the question is, how do you market these things that should be an easy lift to a population that doesn't see any value in it until they run up against a brick wall and they need some
Right.
help, right? And so I've included some of those marketing strategies. We are doing marketing for us in Atlanta is not an issue. We we literally the classes keep increasing. We're turning over classes of 50 to 70 fathers every quarter in
Mm.
Atlanta. We just picked up this contract with child support, and within 3 days, we have 57 fathers in this cohort that's coming. But we built that culture from a marketing point of view when we started Gentle Warriors Academy. Again, I said earlier, the warriors part of it was the attractive piece of it. Like, yeah, we want our warriors to be in this academy, but we want you to understand for everybody else that what we're trying to cultivate is gentle warriors. And then we gave it a tagline: fatherhood is brotherhood. And so when we promote our program, we never promote curriculum. We don't promote services. We don't promote any of that. The way that we frame our services is you need to be in the brotherhood. So
Mm.
if you come to me with a problem, hey, I got blah, 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 you know what you need? You need to be in the brotherhood. And this is
Mm.
how you get into the brotherhood. Sign out this
Mm.
intake form. And then when you get into the brotherhood, we'll tell you all the great things that we have for you that's going to help you with your problems. And then
Mm.
once they get in what they deem the brotherhood, and they get wrapped around all of these other guys who have similar issues, similar problems, and now in 3 classes, they're locked in. We're at a 90%, 100% completion rate with these fathers, because once we get them for 3 weeks, we got them. But
Mm-hmm.
the other shift that is happening from a marketing perspective is when we first started the program in Atlanta, our number one recruitment mechanism was radio. And then TV and billboards kind of went down. Word of mouth was number 6 on our list. Today, word of mouth is number 2.
Mm.
And so, what we were able to do in our programs is create an environment of brotherhood so that these guys felt compelled to go back into their own personal accountability circles and say, hey, you need to be in the brotherhood, bro.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
that's how you
Yeah.
get help. And so, I would love to talk to you about that part of it, because I
Mhm.
believe that it is think about some of the other programs that are manhood masculinity programs around the country that get hundreds of thousands of men to show up, and what they market, right? What they market is, let's go to the farm, let's go to the jungle, let's go to the woods, let's go to the, let's do some high risk
Right.
activities. Let's show it our manlyhood, and they play thematic music,
Right.
cinematic music, and guys are like, yeah, let's go, let's go. We have to figure out the same marketing mechanism to get fathers into the space in order to change the culture of
Right.
how
Right.
fathers see themselves. That's just my own
Right.
personal view of it,
No, no,
but I
that's
would
really
love to
well
talk to
said,
another
man.
marketing
Well said.
marketing
Well, when I
mom to figure
created
out
this
how to do that.
curriculum, I created the curriculum. I had it sitting there on the table. Someone said to me, "You got to market it because this is going to just sit there and nobody will know about it." So my brain goes right up to used car salesman marketing. And I said, "I'm not that. I can't do that." But somebody said, probably Corey's mom, um, just talk about your passion and why you did this.
Right.
Just talk about like start with where they're at and just create a bond. And that's kind of what I did and where it went from there. But you've done a masterful job of marketing, my friend, and it's wonderful to get the word out the way you have is powerful and really really well needed. And
Yeah.
that's not a skill that we all have. That's a challenge.
Yeah, and that's why we have to
So
stay connected. Because for me, it's not a secret. It's not. It is what it is. My wife also has a or somewhat. She has a financial background, but she understands marketing as well. And she'll always, particularly when it comes to social media, and she'll say, listen, people keep saying that folks doesn't have an attention span. They're only going to listen to, 7.5 seconds of your video before they scroll and keep going. That's not the issue. The issue is what makes the one stop who stop. and whatever it is that's making people stop, you got to include it in your messaging so that you increase the time that people listen to your word. I have listened to, and I don't know if you've paying attention to Shannon Sharp, way too many hours of the Shay Shay Club, right? Way too many hours. Each and every one of those podcasts are 2+ hours. And I
Wow.
literally sit and I watch the entire 2.5 over the last 15 to 20 of those episodes. So I know that it's not my attention span. It's what I'm interested in hearing and seeing. And we got to be a little more conscious about how we are promoting our programs so that when men see those things, they're saying, hey, this is something that I really want to invest another 15, 20, 30 an hour of my time in because I want to be a better person. And I don't think we do
Right.
enough of that.
Right.
So, Corey,
Right.
I would love to sit down and chop it up with another marketing mind so we can figure out how to create the perfect book that goes out there. That's a little more
Yeah, you and
conscious
Corey
about
need to
marketing.
definitely have coffee or
Yeah.
lunch or something there.
I'd be honored to do that. I love hearing some of your ideas just now. And
Yeah.
I think you and I sharing best practices together, because at the end of the day, like you said, the end all goal is to get this message out, create the movement, and spread it around the world. So let's do it together.
Yeah. Any last words? And you can tell people how to get in touch with you, how to get to the curriculum, how to get to the training, all that great stuff.
Corey, you want to take that there?
Yeah. Kenneth, thanks again for having what a lively and fun discussion, man. So thank you so much. You're a great interviewer, and appreciate you doing this with us. If you want to learn more about the Nurturing Fathers program, we're at nurturingfathers.com. We're also on social media, Nurturing Fathers program on Instagram and Nurturing Fathers on Facebook. And Dad and I also have a podcast, as we mentioned before. So you can go wherever your podcasts are and type in Nurturing Fathers, listen to us, interview guests like Kenneth did, and also make fun of each other and pick at each other, which is also fun too. So
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you. And to all of my I Am Dad podcast listeners, you know how I like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor Art Mitchell used to always say to me, it's nice to be important, but you know what? It's much more important to be nice. Till next Sunday, peace out and God bless.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am Dad, period.